right, everyone. Welcome for another podcast this morning. We have an amazing guest. I'm Mark Adamski, your host with Wilderness Reboot, transitional support community specifically designed for folks leaving wilderness. It's an alumni network connecting folks around the country. And today we have Jeff Dvorak, the Educo. He's an education consultant. He's worked in so many therapeutic programs, wilderness, and he's going to just tell us about him. And we're going to learn about his story, how he got to this work, and we're going to learn a lot from him today. So I'm really excited. What's happening, Jeff?
What's going on, Mark? Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate you having me because I really like what you do. I think the services that you're offering and the connections that you're offering to families that are coming out of wilderness and the students coming out of wilderness are really important. I'm glad that you're offering something like that. It was what was needed.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's a really interesting experience, and I hope we can get folks some support when they get back home. And so you definitely know about that, supporting families, supporting folks who are coming out of programs, entering programs, that whole process, right? And you have a lot of experience, a lot more in the whole educational world as well, just getting folks to colleges. Why don't you tell us about Educo? And I think you're telling me a little bit about the name. I think we could maybe start there and maybe start with your story.
Yeah. So a little bit about my background. I grew up on Long Island in New York. And, I had a fun, interesting time in the 1980s there. Enough said. But when I graduated high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I didn't necessarily want to, go the traditional path right to college. Wasn't necessarily want to join the military. It wasn't wanting to get a, local job. And I was really curious about, what else was out there in the world. And I had a friend that I hadn't seen in some months, and he came back from wherever he was. He had long hair, and he was really peaked out. And I said, where you been? What did you do? And he said, I did this thing called NOLS, National Outdoor Leadership School,
Nice.
right out in Lander, Wyoming. And he told me a little bit about it. And I said, man, that's what I want to do, right? I had no real experience doing anything like that before. I mean, I had been a Boy Scout on Long Island, but
Sure.
that was not a wilderness experience by any means. So it was back in the day before the internet. I wrote to them. I got a brochure, and I brought it home, and I pitched it to my parents. And, one of the selling points was that I was able to get college credits for it from the University of Utah. And I signed up for a semester-long NOLS course out in the Rockies. And hands down, it was one of the most influential experiences of my life. It changed my life. My father still says to this day, best money I ever spent was, on that NOLS course. And, we couldn't agree more because it set me on a new path in my life that I had not even known of before I had done that. Even though it was not a therapeutic program, it definitely had a therapeutic effect for me. The way that I interacted with people, the mentors that I had there, what I thought might be possible in my life, the direction that I would head in my career, in my education, all had a profound effect because of that, NOLS course. So after I did my NOLS course, I actually wound up going to the University of Montana in Missoula. And, where I was from, nobody ever even had heard of Montana, no less Missoula knew there was a college there, right?
Right.
I mean, everybody I knew went to either a SUNY school or, tried to get into a prestigious school in the Northeast. So I did something that was, really different. And I am always still thankful for that. I got out to Montana. I loved the experience, the people that I met. And, during the course of my time there, I actually wound up living with some people that were working for a therapeutic wilderness program down in southern Idaho. I really didn't know what that was at the time because this was the early 90s.
Sure.
So they were funny. Like they were like, look, you should go down there and either be a student there or you should work there, right? Because I was still, a young man. I was still in transition in that period of my life. So I did go down there. and I did do an interview, and they hired me. It's called SEUS, Adolescent Programs, and it was one of the first therapeutic wilderness programs around, and it wound up spawning a lot of the programs that are out there today. Many of the
Yeah.
names like True North and Blue Fire, those Pacific Quest. Those folks came from Seuss. So I did 5 years on and off at Seuss, which was a great experience for me. I love the opportunity to work with young people that were struggling with different things in their life, and coming from all over the country, all over the world, to come out to southern Idaho. It was a real privilege to have that experience and opportunity, and I built on that. And then, I wound up working for a therapeutic boarding school in Western Massachusetts, where I am now, called Swift River. And I actually wound up starting a program in Costa Rica for them. And I was the director of that for 2 years, which was another great experience. Being able to start a program from scratch in a foreign country, and having all those students from the U.S. come to Costa Rica and have a really profound experience, was amazing to me. And I really reflect back on that time in my life. It was exciting. It was hard, but to see these kids grow and learn, and look back at their lives in America, and see what they have, and the opportunities that were afforded to them in America, that these kids in Costa Rica, or people in Costa Rica, didn't necessarily have,
Totally.
was pretty profound, right?
Yeah.
I still stay in touch with a number of the students, and this is 20 years later, and
Wow.
some of them have now moved to Costa Rica.
No kidding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a couple of kids that have, that experience. They just found, something about Costa Rica, that place, that lifestyle. And a few of them have, kept in touch and written to me and say, "Hey, I live in Costa Rica now because of that." Right. So,
That's
that
so
that
cool.
was pretty cool, right? Pretty cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that especially, I know we're both from the same state. You're more in the real Western Mass, they would say. But
yeah,
especially the East Coast grind and hustle and bustle, going down the Costa Rica, because I also was down there. It's like worlds apart. Just the mindset and pura vida, and
yeah,
for folks who are like go go go, and they come down there. It's a huge change, and I think working with the young adults down there, you can see a big shift, um, different shift in values and priorities, and time goes a little bit slower down there.
yeah. And we truth be told, we didn't baby the kids there. We ran a program. We did a lot of community service that was legitimate. We actually had
Wow.
them working side by side with Costa Ricans, building things. And
Yeah.
we did homestays for a full week. We did some big treks out in the jungle. We did kayaking trips in the Gulf of Duce. um, it was hard at times, and like we know about wilderness, those hard times, like my NOLS course, were the things that really built, the character, and
Sure.
put things in perspective for kids. So,
Yeah.
having that experience, I think was really profound.
That's kind of the self-efficacy model, right? With like Paul Petzel and Knowles, who really
Yeah,
stand more for an outward bound, which is really into like character development. But
yeah,
Paul Petzel with Knowles was a little bit more technically oriented,
yeah,
and being like
skill
really
based.
proficient in certain skills, and that also comes back to like novelty and just building up self-esteem by feeling like you have some competence in some skills, and
Yeah,
snowballing into that and translating that to the rest of your life. And it definitely is exciting to see kids try new things, fail but learn, but have a container to do it within like a safe community. So when you have that group of folks who's all putting themselves out there outside their comfort zone, it's safer, it's fun. You can fail a little bit and learn and take away from that experience, and it's like an experience that you remember.
sure. Yeah. Well, and what we're going to talk about today is, how do you take that experience, um, good and bad and ugly, and move on, with your life, with what it was, right? I mean, we all have a history. We all have a story to tell,
Sure.
and some of it was potentially hard and not the best times in your life, but
Yeah.
it is who you are, and it is, what makes you into the person you are becoming. So, just to summarize, after that, I got more into traditional education. I wound up going to University of Massachusetts. I stayed in the area, and I got my master's in education administration. Then I worked on my doctorate in special education,
Wow.
and I worked for a number of uh, public schools as an English teacher, and then I moved up into administration as a dean of students, assistant principal, and then I moved out to California, and I started doing college counseling for the San Francisco School District. When at the same time I started reading applications for UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley has tens of thousands of applications every year,
Wow.
and they need people to read those. So I wound up for 10 years being what they call an external reader. So for 4 months out of the year, I read about 1,500 freshman applications for UC Berkeley. So I
Woohoo.
really got to see, who gets in and who doesn't, and who gets in and why. So,
Yeah.
so taking all those experiences, I moved to New York City about 10, 12 years ago now, and I started an education consulting practice, taking all those experiences that I had in therapeutic, special education, traditional education, and college, and, threw my hat into the ring. Chose Educo consulting, which is a Latin word, means to draw out, to lead, or to educate. Thought that was pretty neat because
I love
ultimately
that.
that's what I was trying to do. And so far, it's been a great journey. I've built a great practice. Doing all those things, I help families in crisis find therapeutic families or programs for their adolescent and or young adults. I work with families and kids that have special education needs and help them navigate that. And then I do traditional boarding school and college placements. But what I think, a lot of families seek me out for, and what I like to do the best, and I think I am maybe at the best at it, is helping students that maybe have been through therapeutic schools, schools that serve special education students, or students that have had maybe some bumps in the road, a few different high schools, programs, etc. Take that next step into college.
Um,
How do you find the right colleges, the right fit? And then, how do you explain your story to make them feel comfortable that you have three different transcripts, from three different high schools, and are they going to accept you with all that or not, right? So I do a lot of that right now.
wow. Yeah, I'm sure parents and families love you then. And what I'm thinking instantly, my mind's going towards how important it is for a lot of families that their children are getting therapeutic placements that additionally allow them to have and receive college credits. I think that's a big selling point for a lot of programs, and a lot of programs now are offering that in
Yep.
some capacity, depending on the state and the program. And so,
Yep.
um, the question I have for you then, for families, right? Is it going to be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I've been doing this for, 10 years now, and have helped, dozens of students who have been in therapeutic schools and programs who have had F's on their transcripts, and, four different high schools, and, a couple of credits from Wilderness, and, you name it, successfully get into, every college you could imagine, from UC Berkeley to Marist to, Haverford, American. I mean, the list goes on and on. Um, Look, a couple of things are happening right now. Uh, there's no normal, right? Everybody has a unique journey and unique path. And college is like uniqueness, right? They're not looking for, the same old, same old. They're looking
Sure.
for people that have stories, right? And then, we also know that, there's a mental health crisis in this nation right now, and lots of students are struggling with anxiety, depression, other mental health issues, substance abuse issues, right? It's not easy on kids these days, and colleges recognize that. Just you look
Mm.
around, at the colleges themselves and look at the increase in support services they're offering for the students that are there. They recognize that they need to have better counseling, special education support services, places that they can go to be safe and have conversations that will help them, right? So they're not shy to this. They're not unwilling, right? And let's not forget, at the end of the day, colleges are still businesses, right? And they need you and they need your money, and they are willing to take a chance on you if you show, that you potentially could be successful there, right?
Yeah, I think now with mental health advocacy, it's gotten a lot better for kind of destigmatizing students who are having challenges with their mental health, and I think colleges are starting to
Yeah,
spiral upwards and go in the right direction for making accommodations. And it sounded like in the past, and even still currently, there's a lot of challenges with them doing that, and that can be really frustrating for someone, and not only the student but the families going through a big challenge. And yeah, and I personally, I just wonder how that whole process works of telling your story that's unique in a way that's kind of empowering, and telling like an admission board how it shaped your experience. But I'm sure there's probably some reluctancy to be like, oh, they're gonna judge me now.
yeah, yeah,
So how do they navigate? How do they go about that? When do they disclose that information? When do they not
yeah,
disclose?
yeah.
How do you navigate that?
It depends, right? So, so as I before mentioned, if you have like four different high schools on your transcript, and like one of them like Fusion Academy, or clearly a therapeutic school in Utah, something like that, and you're applying from Connecticut, you have to disclose. You have to tell that story. Now, how do you tell that story? I have lots of, so, the general essay is like a 650-word essay. Lots of students choose to take that subject on in that essay, and that's a good way to do it because it kills two birds with one stone. And those two birds are, telling something about yourself that's important, that was meaningful, that shaped you, right? And then also explaining that story of why you have multiple schools on your transcript, which asks in the education section, if you do have more than one school, why did you leave? So you can kind of do that all in that one essay. So the real point of that, and what you really should focus on, is not necessarily the all the doom and gloom that happened, the suicide attempts, the self-harming, the actual drug use. That's not as important as talking about the general struggle. But most importantly, what did you learn from that? How are you a better person for it? And then how are you now better prepared and or prepared to go into this next phase of your life, which would be college, right? They're looking for some reassurances, after those bumps in the road, after those struggles, that you are in a better place. So the real focus is on that, right? It's okay to mention the struggles, and talk about them to a degree to give some context to that, and
Mm.
why you left Kimball Union Academy, because you were struggling with anxiety, which led to some substance abuse issues, and then you went to Wilderness, and then in Wilderness you got the help that you needed, and these are the things that you learned. That's what they're looking for, right? When do you not need to tell that story? So if you went to Kimball Union Academy for all 4 years, and you had pretty good grades throughout, which a lot of kids still maintain pretty good grades even though they're struggling,
Hmm.
and you might have done like a summer wilderness program,
Oh, okay.
um, you don't necessarily have to explain that, right? Because there's no real indication that you did anything other than the traditional path,
Sure.
right? Right now, some kids, they elect to do it anyway, right? They're like, I went to Wilderness over the summer, and it was like a hugely profound experience
Mm.
for me, and I learned so much, and I want to talk about it, and that's okay, right? Again, it's not out of the norm anymore. It's not that abnormal that, you got some help somewhere in your life or you did an experience like that, that you want to talk about. So it's okay to talk about it. But in that circumstance, you don't necessarily need to, right?
Yeah.
If there's no failing grades, there's not, more than one or two or high school transcripts. I mean, even if you have two high school transcripts, it depends. But you don't always have to, self-identify, right?
Yeah.
It depends.
Wow. I'm learning so much already. It's incredible how you've had so many experiences, just, yeah, seeing the whole cycle, working in wilderness, having a life changing experience in NOLS, having a non traditional path, being from Long Island, going to Montana,
Yeah.
and then working in the school system in all these different capacities and knowing what colleges are looking for and how to coach families and students in that process and how to reassure parents it's going to be okay. And
Yeah.
this is really awesome. I would ask, let's see. My question I also want to ask you is for families who are waiting for their children to come out of treatment. Um, I'm curious, two questions. Like, what is a common theme that you see for folks when they're coming out? You
Mhm.
know, I'm thinking like maybe a lot of students are having like program fatigue, and parents already want to like have a plan and set up educational options.
Yeah.
Is it better for folks to have just a decompression phase, or just go right into a therapeutic boarding school or some sort of educational placement right when they're getting out of a program? Or yeah,
Look, it depends, and this is why you get an education consultant to help navigate some of that stuff, right? Um, Look, little off topic, but in that vein, what I'm seeing is that kids need to learn how to navigate life on their own a little bit better and a little bit more. What I'm
mm,
seeing is that families over support their children, right? Especially children that are struggling, because who wants to see their kids struggle, right?
yeah,
But the learning happens in the struggle. Now, obviously, there's degrees of that, and we don't want our kids to go, into a very bad place. But having challenges later in life, or having to learn how to deal with those now helps you later in life, right?
sure,
So, especially in college. What I see is a lot of students that have come from wilderness, maybe that have some, special education needs. Parents over support, right? They have the therapist, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the life coach, the tutor that they've had since, third grade. That have kind of carried them all the way through, but then they hit 18 and then now they're ready to go to college. And even a college that has good support services, um, I see kids struggling when they get to college because they've had too much help and they haven't learned how to do things on their own, right? They don't have the executive functioning skills, they don't have the self-advocacy skills, they might not have the social skills to make that adjustment into college, right? And then unfortunately, as I have this saying, I call it home by Hanukkah. They don't make it through their first semester, right? Because they don't make friends. They don't know how to get the help. When things get hard for them, they don't know how to pick it up and make the adjustment and, get the help that they need to succeed. They just shut down, right?
yeah,
So my advice is, what's that balance, where you're letting your kids figure some of this out without them letting go, too far off the rails, right?
yeah,
And how do you measure and meter that, right? Which is a challenge because you don't know. What I will say is that, you know, let your kid fail a class in high school if they're going to fail a class, right?
yeah,
you know, I see this all the time where, kids are going to this private school in New York City or a boarding school that's got a lot of support, and, none of the kids fail. I'm like, how is that they never fail? Because there's so much pressure on the parents that says, well, my kid can't get a D. They're trying to get into Harvard,
yeah,
right? But what you're basically teaching that kid is that if they don't do the work, parents are going to be there to bail them out, and grades are just kind of bought and
right.
sold,
That's the
right?
covert message, sure.
right? And
Totally.
so, we see this often when kids get to college, is that they think mom and dad is going to be able to come and bail them out, and or they're going to get all the help that they need without actually putting the work in, and then it doesn't go well. So, failing, we learn from that, right? We learn how to be better. We learn how to deal with that feeling. It's not the worst thing in the world. So, being a little bit more, giving a little bit more independence, and being okay with some bumps in the road, is what
Yeah.
you should be doing, right?
Yeah.
Even after therapeutic places, right?
I love that. Yeah, I think a lot of any parent wants the best for their kid, right? And it's that concept of intentions versus impact, right? You think you are helping them and you want to help and you're doing all these things to support them, but the underlying message is that they can't do it on their own and that they need mom and dad to help them.
Right.
And what does that do and how does that set them up for success in the future, or how they potentially engage with future failures? And yeah, little by little, it's a good way of building like resiliency. So I love that. Jeff Dvorak, this has been really, really fun. We learned a lot. So a lot of folks are probably going to listen to this and want to work with you or potentially contact you. How can they contact you? Or
Yeah, my phone number is 704-724-1781. Great way to get in touch with me. I'm often on the road. I'm traveling. My email address is Jeff at Educo, EDUCO, consulting, CONSULTING.com, all one word. And my website is educoconsulting.com. So I'm always talking to families. I'm always here to help. It's one of the things that I think I do best and I really enjoy. So,
yeah,
if you need some advice, give me a call.
yeah, I love your passion for this work and I wish you the absolute best. Stoked to have you on this podcast. Jeff Dvorak, Educo, drawing the best out in people. And thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
All right. See ya.